A 16-year-old boy gets thrown out of school, wanders around New York for 3 days, insults nearly everyone he meets, and decides the entire adult world is phony. That's very nearly the whole plot. The boy is Holden Caulfield, and from the first page, he's talking straight to you. Funny, cutting, and very obviously not okay. He's just been expelled from his 4th school. He can't face going home, so he slips into New York for a few days, killing time until the bad news reaches home without him. And yet, this slim novel has spent 70 years being one of the most loved and most banned books ever written. And most people who read it come away with completely the wrong idea. One word follows him everywhere. Phony. Everyone's a phony. Teachers, actors, smooth men in bars. It's easy to hear that as a bratty teenager who thinks he's better than everyone. But listen to who he actually means. It's always people faking it, performing, saying what they don't mean. What Holden can't stand is a lie, dressed up as normal. So he drifts, and every attempt he makes to connect quietly falls apart. He checks into a shabby hotel and watches the sad, strange people in the windows across the way. He phones old girlfriends at absurd hours just to hear a voice. He hires a prostitute and then can't go through with it, because he only wants someone to talk to, and gets beaten up by her pimp for the trouble. On a date with a girl named Sally, he suddenly blurts out a desperate plan to run away together and live in a cabin in the woods. When she sensibly says no, he lashes out and wrecks the afternoon. That's the rhythm of the whole book. Holden reaching for someone with real need, then torching it the instant they fail to understand him. And here is the thing most people race past. Holden had a younger brother, Allie, who died of leukemia when Holden was 13. He still carries Allie's old baseball mitt everywhere, its fingers covered in little poems Allie had written on it. He mentions Allie almost in passing, the way you mention something you can't bear to look at directly, and then tells us that on the night Allie died, he smashed every window in the garage with his bare fists. Once you know about Allie, the whole book changes shape. Holden is not a sulky teenager. He is a grieving child in the middle of a breakdown, and not one adult around him has noticed. He's coming apart in a city of 8 million people. He's reduced to asking taxi drivers where the ducks in Central Park go when the lagoon freezes over. Which is really him asking the deepest question in the book. What happens to the small, defenseless things when the world turns cold? The one person who reaches him is his little sister, Phoebe, 10 years old, sharp, and able to see straight through him. He sneaks home in the dark just to sit on her bed and talk, and it's Phoebe who backs him into naming a single thing he actually wants. And so he tells her the daydream that gives the book its name. He pictures a huge field of rye on the edge of a cliff, full of children playing with no adults anywhere, and the only job he wants in the world is to stand at the edge and catch any child who runs too close before they fall. But Phoebe gently corrects him. The line he's dreaming on comes from a Robert Burns poem, and it doesn't say catch a body coming through the rye. It says meet a body. Holden has built his one pure fantasy on a line he misheard, and somewhere in him he already senses the truth it points to. You can't actually catch them. What he's really terrified of was never adulthood itself. It's the loss of innocence, the thing that took Allie, that will one day reach Phoebe, and that has quietly already taken him. It all resolves in a single image. Desperate, Holden decides to run away for good and asks Phoebe to meet him to say goodbye, and she turns up dragging a suitcase because she's coming too. The sight of his little sister ready to fall out of her own childhood to follow him breaks the plan in his hands. To make peace, he takes her to the zoo carousel instead. She rides it round and round, reaching for the gold ring the way children do, and Holden sits on a bench in the pouring rain and watches her. And suddenly he's crying and says he's never been so happy in his life because he finally understands. Children reach for the gold ring and sometimes they fall, and you cannot protect them. All you can do is let them ride and love them and hope. He lets go of catching. And only now do we learn he's been telling us all of this from a hospital where he's being treated after his breakdown. The whole book, a boy explaining himself from inside the crisis. The man who wrote it knew that darkness from the inside. J.D. Salinger landed at Normandy on D-Day and fought across Europe for 11 months through some of the war's worst campaigns and was among the soldiers who helped liberate a Nazi concentration camp. He was hospitalized for what we'd now call post-traumatic stress, and he carried the early chapters of this book with him through the war in his pack. A story aching to protect the innocence of children was written, page by page, by a young man watching innocence destroyed on an industrial scale. When it made him famous in 1951, he hated it, retreated behind a high fence in rural New Hampshire, and essentially vanished, publishing nothing after 1965, though he kept writing for himself until he died in 2010. So read it, or read it again. If you were handed this book at 15 and found Holden insufferable, you were reading it as his peer. Come back as an adult and it becomes the portrait of a grieving child in freefall, surrounded by grown-ups too distracted to really look at him. It stops being irritating and becomes almost unbearably sad. And read it for the voice, because 70 years later, Holden still sounds like someone talking to you right now, and to anyone who has ever felt like the only real person in a room full of performances hears their own voice in his.